Real quick, I'd like to give a massive shout out to all the homies on Patreon who chose to support the cult and help keep the lights on. If you want more information on how to support the channel and get your name up here at these fucking chads, check out the video description below. All right. Hey guys, now that we know Phase 5 is around the corner, I figured it was due time, well to be honest past time, to do a Phase 5 best in slot guide. I hope Mount Hyjal, Black Temple, and ZA all have been treating you well, and more importantly, I hope you guys have Skull of Guldan. I personally do not have this still on either Warlock and it's driving me absolutely fucking crazy, but I digress. Today we'll go over Phase 5 BiS for Warlocks. As much as I'd like to make a separate one for the specs share the same best in slot, besides the trinket for Affliction that I'll touch on when we get there. Even more so, not that much changes from this to your best in slot for your seed sets, because ultimately your single target set will have all these major haste slots. Of course there are some minor changes, and once again I'll get into that later as well. Not only that, but I'm not going to go over every hit piece. Rather, if you're not in a group with the elemental shaman, simply just put on a hit ring or a cloak, etc. There's a variation of BiS, but it will depend on your professions. Which, while we're on the topic of professions, there's one that literally every warlock will want to be, and that's tailoring. Largely, well solely, because of this lovely chest piece called the Sunfire Robe. There's also a pair of gloves called the Sunfire hand wraps that you'll probably end up wearing until you get the best in slot ones off Kill Jaden. However, those Sunfire gloves are bind on equip like belted blasting and braces of Nimble Thought were, so you'll be able to get them off the auction house. As for your other profession, well that's largely up to you. Myself and many others choose engineering, as you get very good value out of all those grenades, since I typically throw one when it's off cooldown and whenever I need to tap, since it doesn't incur a global, so it's just free damage when I tap. Along with sappers, which have proved to be very helpful for parsing fights like Tidewalker and Solarian in tier 5, and it will be huge coming up here in Muru and Sunwell. Rocket boots are more niche for the speedrunners, but I assure you that I'll find some sort of use for the rocket boots as we lack so little movement. Also, looking a little ahead into the future of Wrath of the Lich King, engineering will be a must by all warlocks, as it actually gives you an on-use haste enchant for your gloves that gives you a chunk of haste on a 1 minute cooldown. Not only that, but you actually get to put rockets on your boots. So in this example, I put a pair of rockets on my slippers of the Sea Caller, and those are your rocket boots. Pretty OP. But yeah, not a bad time to make the swap to engineering if you've ever been on the fence, and I may be biased here, but engineering can add a little bit of excitement to an otherwise boring rotation. Next up, jewel crafting. Jewel crafting becomes a very strong profession coming up here in Phase 5, largely, well once again solely in part due to this beefy ass JC only neck called the Pendant of Sunfire, which is the only neck in the game with not only crit and haste, but also a socket. Not only that, but you're more or less guaranteed the pattern since there's not many JCs out there. Note that if you intend to do JC, you really want the chest off Muru ASAP, as it becomes your best in slot since you can no longer craft the tailoring only Sunfire Robe. A strong play here is to go tailoring at the start, then once you have tamed the Muru chest, since you don't know how long it'll take to see one drop, and the fact that you have to get it, then you have to get rid of tailoring and swap to JC. Closing note on JC though, this option is slightly more appealing to Alliance more than Horde at this point in the game, as it gets harder to drop spell hit rating, and thanks to the Draenei racial inspiring presence, Alliance need less hit than Horde do, and being able to drop the hit from the non-JC neck gets their hit a little more to a comfy number. That's just something else to think about for later. Lastly, there's enchanting. Well, nothing new here, just the same little nice 12 spell power enchants on both your rings for a total of 24 spell power. Note that you must remain enchanting to keep the spell power bonus. Second you drop enchanting, you lose both those ring enchants. As for which two you choose, that decision is completely up to you. I personally will be engineering and tailoring on my main. I love engineering for the reasons listed above, plus I've been engineering since day one as it's required by all my guilds. My second profession currently is enchanting, however I will be dropping that for tailoring pretty soon here due to the overpowered Sunfire robes. I do have another warlock who just so happens to be Alliance, and I'm thinking about going NGJC route on him just to try it out for myself. Next, let's touch on the gems, because they can get a little hectic in Phase 5 with all the new pretty gems. These are the main gems that you should be using in this phase. The almighty 12 spell power red gems. The trusty purple spell power stam gems, only using 2 of them to activate your meta gem, which by the way is still chaotic Skyfire Diamond. And the last gem you'll be using is the new 5 haste 6 spell power gems. These are the lovely gems that you've heard oh so much about, and you are only using these to secure your socket bonus because at this stage in the game, the socket bonuses are worth it for about 4 to 5 spell power. Of course, use hit gems whenever necessary, however, you really shouldn't have to. And since you're probably wondering about the new 10 haste gems, they're not worth it at all over the 12 spell power gems. They're not even worth it over the 5 haste 6 spell power gems. You can make the argument that you can use those 10 haste gems for more haste on phase 1 or Muru, which in fact is a big AoE phase, but to be honest, that phase won't be the issue for most guilds. The issue, and which is your job as a warlock, is to kill the sentinels, which is your focus the entire time. So put 2 purple gems in your meta, put red gems in every single slot besides what has a 4 or 5 spell power socket bonus, and in those ones use the reckless pyre stone. Side note, if you're one of those guys who's super sweating haste gems and you've been waiting all expansion to stack yellow or orange gems, then by all means do it. We're talking a minute differences here, okay? So enjoy your warlock however you want to, pumper. One more thing before we go over the gear. Our tier 6 4-piece is still amazing, but now it's even better. We get access to the other 4 pieces of tier 6 from Sunwell, and unlike the previous 4 that we've seen, these ones all have haste on it. Not only that, but some of them literally have all the stats in the game. Example, look at these belts and these boots. Crit, haste, hit, spell power. Pretty insane. So as you can imagine, these 2 are your musts in your 4 set. Then you can use the bracers as a 3rd since they have haste on them. Then just continue to use your shoulders to complete the 4 set. Of course, if you get something new and shiny like the shoulders off of twins, you can definitely use them until you get a proper setup down the road. Okay, let's finally get over the gear. I'm just going to show the one with tailoring first and use it as a baseline since it's kind of what majority of warlocks will be. I'll show the JC one after as well, but TLDR, it only changes the neck and the robe, like we mentioned earlier. Anyway, to start, you want the Dark Conjurer's collar off of Kil'jaeden. From this point on, I'll call him KJ, and he's also the final boss in the game. This will be the first and only headpiece with haste on it that you can obtain. Well, besides the healer one, but let's not go there again, shall we? Anyways, outside of that helmet, you don't really have anything else to look out for. If you're engineering and you're able to get a new tier 6 piece with haste on it early, for example, your belt or whatever, then you can use that to connect your 4 set and then swap to your T6 helmet for engineering goggles if you want that slight upgrade until the KJ helmet drops for you. That's up to you. Next up is the neck, and you have 2 options, and it's very obvious which one you choose. If you're JC, then you go for the Pendant of Sunfire. If you're not JC, then you go for the Amuleted Unfettered Magic off of Twins. Pretty simple. In the meantime, there's also a Season 4 neck called the Guardian's Pendant of Subjugation that deserves a shout out. It's got slightly less haste than the ZA necks, but it's got a nice gem socket to make up for it, and if you put a red 12 spell power gem in it, it's actually sims higher. Plus, it only costs 15,000 honor, and you can get it ahead of time. I would suggest using that until you get the good necks. Next up is shoulders. This is the slot that best worked out to remain tier 6. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, if you're lucky enough to get the twin shoulders and you have another piece of tier 6 you can use in another slot, then you 100% should. A good example is the T6 helmet and these shoulders. Just because these shoulders aren't your absolute BiS doesn't make them bad. In fact, if you get these, you're lucky to have them, as they'd probably be the last thing you'd replace on your body. Next up is Cloak. I don't know about you guys, but I'm still using Nether Void Cloak, and I would love a haste cloak. Luckily, if we get a beefy one off KJ called the Tattered Cape of Antonidas, which comes with a lovely socket to slot in your favorite gem of choice. Next is the robe slot, which a lot like the neck is pretty obvious at which ones you want to pick. But if you're tailoring, you want to use the Sunfire robe. This pattern is OP and it drops off the Sunwell trash mobs, and every single warlock in the world should be hard farming these in trash farm groups ASAP, if you can, of course. As I said earlier, in my opinion, every warlock should be tailoring and should be trying to get these robes or this pattern, which will be very expensive on the auction house. Of course, if you're not tailoring, then your best in slot will be the robe off of Muru called the Fell Conqueror's Raiments. A weird middle ground if you're either waiting for BiS robes or you have horrible luck, and you can use the robes of Ghastly Hatred, which are only a few haste and a little bit of stamina behind the Raiments. Good luck though, because these are BiS for mages, I believe. Also, these are part of the Tempest Sunwell garb, which I'm going to just call the 6.5 tier from now on. None of these pieces of garb will be best in slot, but each of them would be a good middle ground or alternative to wear while waiting for your ultimate best in slot piece. This garb also acts differently than most, well, all other pieces of gear in the game, as it requires a completely separate piece of gear, which is typically a healing piece of gear. In this example, the robes of Faltered Light, and then a sun mote in order to turn this into the Ghastly Hatred robes for DPS. So yeah, no matter what route you choose, you will have a new chest waiting for you soon. Next up is bracers. You'll want T6 bracers. Don't worry about anything else. Just get these and put them on and don't ever remove them. Next up is gloves. There's a few pretty good gloves that you can obtain in Sunwell, and gratefully, at least 2 of them have haste on them finally. The absolute best in slot ones are the handguards of Defiled Worlds off of KJ. In the meantime, you can use the new BOE tailoring gloves called Sunfire hand wraps, which are a nice upgrade from your T6 gloves once you find a T6 replacement, of course. And lastly, the gloves of Tyrese Power, whatever, which are another one of those 6.5 Tempest guard pieces. These ones require Hand Gardens of the Dawn and of course the Sun Mote to turn into Tyrese Power, which I believe mages prefer over KJ gloves, so you may have a harder time getting these than the KJ gloves. In any matter, you use whichever you get in the meantime, and with the end goal being the KJ gloves. Next up is the belt, and you only have one option, and it's tier 6 belt. This belt is broken. Look at it. Look at that. It comes with crit, hit, haste, spell power, and a socket. Slap once again your favorite gem in it and call it a day. Next up is your legs. The best ones that you can get are the leggings of Calamity off of Brutalis. These are absolutely phenomenal pants that literally all casters want, so good luck. There's another pair of those 6.5 Tempest garb set called Pantaloons of Growing Strife, which require the Calming Strife pants in a sun moat. These pants are also good to wear in the meantime while you're waiting for the big Calamity pumper pants. However, make sure you have one of those new T6 pieces to wear in its place for your 4 set, and also make sure you have some hit as you lose a little bit of hit when you drop your T6 pants. Next up is boots. Thankfully, we can keep it short and simple here. Get your tier 6 boots as fast as you can. Okay, step 1. Put them on. Once they're on your feet, do not remove them. These are one of the only pieces in the game that give you crit, hit, haste, spell power, and a socket. Easy. Next up are your beautiful rings. Now, as always, we have options for rings, and a lot of them. What you choose should be based upon your spell hit rating. No matter what though, you really want to get your hands on a Ring of Omnipotence. This ring is actually insane, as it's one of the only rings in the game with spell haste and crit on it. Your second ring will depend all about your hit. In a perfect BiS situation, the hit is needed, and in its place we use Loop of Forged Power. Now a little disclaimer here. Loop of Forged Power is a jewel crafting BOE ring, and usually a very, very, very expensive one. I mention this because in comparison to the mana attuned band from ZA, it's only got 1 more haste and 1 more hit and 27 stamina. Look, I'm not going to tell you how to spend your gold, but yeah, just a heads up. And lastly, on the rings, if you ever find yourself not needing hit, which you will at some point during your Sunwell gearing, just use the Ring of Ancient Knowledge. It's the second best ring if no hit is needed. Next up is trinkets. As exciting as the trinket slot always is, well, there's not much to talk about. Your 2 in-game best in slot trinkets are, of course, Skull of Guldan, which I fucking still don't have, and it's really tilting. And then the new trinket off of Muru called the Shifting Naru Sliver. This trinket is pretty dope, as it puts a power circle on the ground for 15 seconds, and when you stand in it, it gives you 320 spell power. It's pretty crazy how good it is, and I hope you all have better luck obtaining it than I did with the Skull of Guldan. Of course, for those of us not lucky enough to get these trinkets, we still use a good mix of Hex, Shrunken Head, Icon, and the trusty, dusty, musty Quag's Eye. The wand slot is, well, as boring as it's always been, but at least we finally get an upgrade. It's called the Wand of Demon Soul, and it's one of the only wands in the game with haste on it, and a fat gem socket. There's also a legit healing version of this with less haste, but still has a fat socket. Both of these wands drop from trash, and you should be hard farming the Demon Soul one ASAP. Lastly, and of course, most importantly, the weapon slots. Straight to the point, there's 2 new options in Sunwell, and I'm going to keep it real with you. You really only have one option, because this staff right here is literal cheeks. I don't even think I'd use this over the ZA Blade and Badge Haste combo, to be honest. What you do want, though, is Sunflare from KJ for your main hand, and Heart of the Pit from Brutalis in your offhand. There's really nothing that compares to them, and until then, just continue using your Zardoom, your Tempest of Chaos, or your ZA Blade until you can get it. Well, guys, that's it for me. That's it, man. I went into a little more detail, and I hope you guys enjoyed this one. As you guys know, this is the last BiS list from TBC. I really appreciate those of you that have been here since day 1 and watched me grow this whole time. I appreciate all the tips and the help that's helped me grow, and most importantly, shout out to the Warlock Discord, your one-stop shop for all things Warlock. I intend to do the same thing for all raid tiers and phases in Wrath of the Lich King, and for all specs, which, by the way, is much more interesting since each spec stats and gears quite differently. Until then, I'll see you guys around, and let me know what you guys think and want done in order to prep for Lich King. Please follow me if you're not already, and comment if you've been here since the whole expansion. Much, 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 much love, and see you guys later. Peace.